Hello, welcome to QE Auto. Today's video will be on an oil change. This was the demo for that. So when we're doing an oil change, it needs to be done at a regular interval for the vehicle. Standard would be every 5,000 kilometers, but depending on the type of oil in the vehicle that you have, you may be allowed to do it every 8,000 or even 12,000 kilometers with high synthetic oils. Please see your owner's manual and specifications for figuring out what interval you need before you complete an oil change. When we start with an oil change, the first thing that we need to do after lifting up the car safely is determine where the oil pan is located and how to drain out the oil. Now the way to do that, the easiest way, is to find out where the transmission is first. Now in this van, it is a front wheel drive vehicle, so if we looked on both sides of the vehicle, we will see axles that are connected to the wheels. Those axles, if you follow the bars, will lead into the transmission from both sides, and in this case, this big pan in the back is our transmission. So that means the front pan here is our engine, and that is where we're going to be draining the oil. The drain plug is located always at the back of the oil pan at the lowest possible point for drainage. We also have the oil filter up in the front. The oil filter sometimes can be located in any part of the lower portion of the vehicle, also on the back or front of the block itself. So you really have to be aware of where that filter is located. So the first thing that we're going to do is take out the drain plug. Making sure that you have the correct socket and ratchet if you're using this. If you're using a wrench, just make sure you have the right size. Make sure it is in the loosening direction, so lefty-loosey, going to the left, counterclockwise. Place it onto the drain plug firmly and loosen it off. Now you should be able to do this all by hand, and when I am loosening it, I'm actually keeping my pointer finger pressed up against the head of the bolt and using the other two fingers, my thumb and middle finger, around it to do the rotation. This will allow me to keep the drain plug into the hole and the littlest amount of oil spilling out on my hand or in the drain catch pan. Make sure that the pan is underneath the drain plug directly, and also make sure it has enough capacity and area to catch the oil as it's draining out at an arc. We want to make sure that we're catching all the oil in the drain pan and not landing on the floor. So here we go. Make sure you have a rag ready to go to clean up your hands and the drain plug once you have started to remove oil. Once you're ready, you're keeping it pressured on until you see a couple drops of oil and remove the drain plug. So as you can see with the drain plug out, you need to make sure that it's nice and clean so that we can actually see the seal that is at the bottom of the drain plug. Now every drain plug does need a seal. Some are rubber, some are fabric, some might be copper or aluminum, but every one does need a seal. Now what you're doing is you're looking at that seal to see if there's any cuts or imperfections, something that is impeding it from stopping the oil from coming out. In this case, this drain plug is ready to go. It is nice and clean, so we'll just set that off to the side for right now. And we will wait for the oil to go drip, drip, drip. We want to get as much of that old oil out as possible. We don't want to plug the hole before all the old oil is drained out. At this time, you may be able to bring the catch basin over and underneath the oil filter at the same time. Oil filter for this vehicle is located right here. Now to remove the filter, we have a couple different tools, and I'll go from my least favorite to my most favorite. So Right here, this is called an oil filter wrench, and it works by going over that oil filter. And as you're loosening in the loosening direction, you can see that it tightens up around that filter to loosen off. Now, the negative factors about this is it's just clean metal all the way around, so there's a good chance of it slipping. So if that oil filter is on there super tight, tighter than it should be, this will never work. So this is my least favorite item to use for taking off a filter. For some vehicles, it may be hard to get into that filter, so what they have is a socket that fits just over the filter itself. Now again, this has its positives and its negatives. This is a direct fit over top of the filter. It's got little points in here to actually grab the filter, but at the same time, if it's been over tightened, there's a good chance that it will just slip and you'll have to resort to another method of removing a filter. This would be removed with either a wrench on the outside or a ratchet on the inside. Again, not my favorite. My favorite is an oil filter plier. So this is adjustable. It's a two-way adjustable. You just press this pin in here and you can adjust the jaws into a bigger or larger location for a filter. But by using the pliers, it has special teeth that grip onto the outside of the filter, and we can see that this would be a much better option for removing the filter if it's either on there at the proper torque or if it has been over torqued. So let's go ahead and remove that filter. Once you have loosened it with the pliers, you should be able to remove the rest by hand. Now, be mindful that there may be some oil that does drip down, like you see here. You may get your hand a little bit oily. Just make sure that you have a rag there to collect it, and flip the canister oil filter upside down when you're finished. So with the oil filter out, and because we are doing a lab, we want to make sure that it's perfectly clean other than the inside, which is going to always have a little bit of oil remaining. We want to clean off that canister so that we can replace it back into our vehicle. Now if we were doing an actual oil change, you would never use a filter. You would always get a brand new filter that matches the correct number. I want to quickly discuss the differences between two types of filters. One is the canister type of filter that we have here, and then there's also a cartridge filter of the same type of filter. It's just the inside of this, and I'll insert a picture into the film here. Now you can see the difference in the picture, that one is just the paper, the filter itself, and does not have a metal can on it. So the differences between them are the canister filter is in one part in itself, and the cartridge filter has a small cap, like something like this, where the filter goes into it and then the cap goes on top. You'll see the difference when you look at your individual vehicles. Before replacing the filter, we now need to clean up the area that we were working with. So we need to go up and in to where the filter was and to the drain plug and clean up any excess oil that has been dripping down. So we're going to get up there and we are going to clean off the areas where there is oil still dripping or where we have made contact with the parts or pieces. We want to have a clean area to work with. Okay, and we'll also do the back. So before we put the filter back in, the first thing is, if we're using a pre-used filter for a lab or doing a brand new oil change for a vehicle, we need to lubricate this rubber ring that's around here. And if you were using a canister that's right here, we would have a rubber ring that's around there as well. So you need to lubricate those to put things back in. So you take your finger, you dip it into the old oil, just a little bit, and you're going to coat that ring, that seal, gasket, with a little bit of oil before applying the filter back into the socket. Now, when you're putting a filter back in, you don't need tools. It is just done by hand. So we need to locate where that goes back in onto the stud, and we are going to thread it back on. Once we have it hand tight, just enough so that it goes on, then we need to give it a 1/2 to 3/4 turn in order for it to be secured on properly. So imagine it being a clock. You're going from the 12 o'clock position to 3 o'clock to 6 o'clock, and if you can make it, to 9 o'clock, but no further than that. After you have tightened it, make sure you give it another wipe up to make sure that there's no oil on there and nothing dripping. And now we can turn our attention to the drain plug. The drain plug has been cleaned off. We checked that the seal is done and good. So we'll put this back into the hole, make sure we're going the right direction as we're putting it back in. We are going to put that in just by hand. And just as we get a little bit of pressure, we'll come back for our rag, wipe everything off so there's no oil, and we'll get back to our ratchet. Now, making sure that it's in the tightening order. Okay, so going from 12 o'clock going right, that is going to be for tightening. Now, for tightening a drain plug, there is a torque spec, but the way that I like to tighten my drain plugs is by the finger technique. So, if you are tightening with a ratchet, the first thing that you normally do is grab the handle and tighten. But that's going to be too much pressure applied to the drain plug, and you're probably going to snap or spin out the threads. So you can also open up your hand and place that ratchet into 3 different finger slots. Now if you look at that in the 3 different finger slots and you close your hand, you can see how much force you can apply to the ratchet by how much of your hand is touching the ratchet itself. So by putting it in my pointer finger location, you have 1/2 a ratchet worth of torque. If you put it in your middle finger, you got just 1/2 of that amount of torque. Go into your pinky, you just are touching the head of the ratchet and you have a little bit of torque. So for a drain plug, what you want to do is you want to get in there and use the middle finger technique and tighten that down. Okay, and I'm going to show you that next. Just to make sure it's tight. And there we go. We have our drain plug tightened and we have our filter retightened. And now we can move over to the top of the vehicle to show you how to put oil back into the car and to check the fluid level. Once we have the vehicle back on the ground on a flat level surface, we can replace the oil. For doing so, we need to first remove the cap for introducing the new oil into the engine. Okay. In this case, it's a big longer cap, and it actually has the oil rating on here, so 5W30. Okay, we see that this is for oil because it has the oil container, and it's right on top of the valve cover. We'll place this to the side. Then we'll bring in a funnel. We'll put the funnel into its location, and it should stay there by itself. If not, get a partner to help you. And as soon as you have your funnel in place, now if you were doing a proper oil change, you would add in the correct amount and volume of oil that needs to go in there. In our case, for our shop labs, we're going to put in our old oil because it is very wasteful and expensive to keep on using new oil every single time. So I will be pouring in the oil that we've taken out in our catch basin by slowly tipping it over through the spout and reintroducing it into the engine. This may take a little bit of time, and make sure that you try and get as much of that old oil out as possible. Once you see that the most of the oil has gone back in, take a rag cover up that catch basin, and remove that off to the side. If you were doing the lab, you will let it drain for a little bit longer than I did in this video, but at that point we are ready to continue. The funnel can now be removed as well, again using a rag to take it out. And at this point we can now check our oil level via the dipstick. So when you're checking oil level via the dipstick, first thing you're going to do is you're going to take the dipstick out and drag the cloth along the entire dipstick as you're removing it. This will then expose the marker on the bottom of the dipstick that will show a hash mark and little divots right here. So at the bottom of the dipstick will be the low marker at the bottom of the hash marks. This will be the full marker. So we need to have the oil in between these two markers in order to have a proper amount of oil. We do not want it lower than this level, and we do not want it higher than this level. So let's put that dipstick back in, and let's read the level. Carefully bringing it up, not dragging it on the cloth this time, but placing it against the cloth, we can see that our oil level has come to the top of the hash marks. Now if you are doing an oil change with some new oil, you will be starting up the engine at the point of you knowing how much oil needs to go in there so that the oil can cycle through the engine and so that you can get a proper level read. You want to run the engine for at least 10 to 15 seconds, making sure that there's no leaks underneath the vehicle. And if there is any problems, turn the vehicle off immediately. Once you recheck the oil and you have it in between the hash marks, so in between that low to the full mark, as close to the full as possible, you may need to add a little bit more oil to get there. Once you have done that, grab your cap, close up the engine, and now we will make our way over to the window decal. So this window decal is only needed when you're doing an oil change for a customer or for yourself. It is a reminder of when you need to do your servicing. So the mileage would be whatever your vehicle's at now, plus the 5, 6, 8, or 12,000 kilometer range that you are allowed to have for your vehicle. On the bottom would be the grade of oil. In this case, we had 5W30, and service due date would be in at least 3 months. So you want to have your service done at least every 3 months, or the kilometer range as long as you are driving your vehicle. Thanks for watching.